Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. When you think of the most memorable game of Brett Favre's career, this is probably the one that comes to mind. December 22nd, 2003. Monday Night Football in Oakland against the Raiders. One day after the death of his father, Favre decides that he's going to play in the game and continue his Iron Man streak. And in memory of his dad, Favre not only puts together one of the greatest games in the history of Monday Night Football, but puts together arguably the greatest game of his illustrious and storied career. 399 yards passing, 4 touchdowns and no interceptions, with all 4 of those touchdowns coming in the first half. A 154.9 passer rating, which would be the highest of his career, and a dominating 41-7 victory against the reigning AFC champion. Nearly 2 decades later, people remember this game, and rightfully so. Considering the circumstances and considering everything that Favre went through just to play in the game, for him to perform at the level that he did was inspiring. But what you might not know is that 2 decades before that, there was a similar performance by a quarterback overcoming adversity to put together the best game of his career. And oddly enough, this one came against the Green Bay Packers. In 1980, Lions quarterback Gary Danielson overcame an unspeakable tragedy to play at the highest level he'd ever played at. And this is the story behind the most heroic performance in Lions history. Before I talk about the game and the tragedy, we need some context leading up to the events in question. In 1976, following a stint in the now-defunct World Football League, Gary Danielson continued his professional football career in the NFL and signed with the Detroit Lions. Danielson's role on the team was as a backup. He was not going to overtake Greg Landry for the starting spot. Landry had been with the team for close to a decade at this point, was a former Pro Bowler, and in 1976 had one of the best years of his career, throwing 17 touchdowns and just 8 interceptions. Especially back then, a touchdown to interception ratio greater than 2-1 was amazing. Danielson was the second stringer, and that was his role. But the following year in 1977, everything changed. In a 6-game stretch near the middle of the season, Landry struggled tremendously. Over those 6 games, he threw for just 407 yards, or just under 68 yards per game. He completed just 50% of his passes. He threw 1 touchdown and 6 interceptions, got sacked 13 times, and had a passer rating of 38.9. For some perspective, that passer rating is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. And perhaps most importantly, the Lions went 1-5 in that stretch. Landry's Lions had scored more than 20 points just once over the entire season, and that was all the way back in week 2. Landry just wasn't cutting it anymore, and head coach Tommy Hudspeth decided to make the switch to Gary Danielson. While Landry started the 1978 season under new head coach Monty Clark, after 5 lethargic games, where the Lions went 1-4 and Landry only threw for 452 yards and 1 touchdown, while taking 21 sacks, including 8 in one game against the Packers, Danielson was back under center for Detroit. And maybe to the surprise of a lot of people, Danielson performed really well. He ended the season with 18 touchdown passes, which was the 6th most in the league and the 3rd most in the NFC, only behind Hall of Famers Fran Tarkenton and Roger Staubach. He finished the season with a 73.5 passer rating, which ranked only behind Staubach and Saints quarterback Archie Manning in the NFC. He went 6-5 in his 11 starts. Considering the fact that Detroit went 3-10 in Landry's previous 13 starts, that's really impressive. And when Landry was shipped off to the Baltimore Colts during the offseason, the message was clear. This was now Gary Danielson's team. The 1979 season was going to be his year. Unfortunately for him, it didn't quite work out that way. By this point, everyone was feeling pretty good about Danielson leading the Lions, and the game that really sealed the deal was the penultimate game of that 1978 campaign. The week before against the St. Louis Cardinals, the Lions lost 21-14, with Danielson throwing 5 interceptions and getting sacked 4 times, while completing less than 43% of his passes. As Danielson said, he was so frustrated about that performance that he didn't shave for an entire week. But he rebounded amazingly well against the Vikings, because the following week, in a 45-14 victory, he went off. He went 26 for 33. He completed over 78% of his passes. He threw for 352 yards, threw 5 touchdowns, and had a passer rating of 138.1. You could easily make the argument that he had the best game by any quarterback in the league that season. In 1979, there was no controversy. Joe Reed and Jeff Kumlow were not fighting for the starting job. This was Danielson's team all the way. And then, he got hurt in the preseason. He suffered damage to his knee and had to get surgery, missing the entire season. The Lions never really recovered from that, as without Danielson under center, They went from a possible contender to the worst team in football overnight. The Lions went 2-14, scoring just 219 points across their 16 games. Not only was that the worst total in football, but it comes out to an average of less than 14 points per game. They scored 28 points over their final 4 road games. They were held to single digits 4 times in a 7-game stretch. With 9th round pick Jeff Kumlow primarily leading the way, it got very, very ugly. The good news for Detroit was that Danielson would be back for the 1980 season. The even better news was that because of their ineptitude, they wound up with the number 1 overall pick in the draft. And they used that pick to take Oklahoma running back Billy Sims. No one really knew what to expect from Detroit in 1980. On one hand, they were the worst team in football last year. On the other hand, their starting quarterback was back in action, who was good in his limited time the last time we saw him back in 1978, and they had one of the greatest college running backs of all time, and a former Heisman winner to help spark the offense. We got our answer pretty quickly on opening day. September 7th, 1980. The Lions are traveling to Los Angeles to take on the Rams, who are the defending NFC champions and were surprisingly close to being the Super Bowl champions. Detroit blew them out. Danielson did what he had to do, going 10 for 19 with 173 yards, and Billy Sims put together what might be the greatest debut of all time, scoring 3 touchdowns, rushing for 153 yards, and recording another 64 yards receiving. Not only was Danielson back, and not only were the Lions 1-0, but Danielson's wife had just given birth to their 3rd child, a daughter, just a few days before. Everything was looking great for Danielson. Unfortunately, this is where an absolutely unspeakable tragedy was about to strike. On September 2nd, 1980, Gary and his wife Christy gave birth to their 3rd child. However, just 9 days later, on September 11th, their daughter would pass away. There was no information available about how she died or what complications she suffered. She was just 9 days old. And even though the Lions were scheduled to play the Packers 3 days later, obviously football was the furthest thing on anyone's mind, and rightfully so. To lose your newborn daughter is an absolutely horrible tragedy. Danielson's teammates knew about what he was going through, and Danielson was not there on Thursday or Friday during the day. Nobody thought that Danielson was actually going to play in the game. How can you even think about football or focus or think clearly at a time like this? But roughly 24 hours after the tragedy, Danielson spoke with his wife and felt that it was in his best interest to play the game. As he said, "I told my wife that we have 2 other little kids, and that this was a tragedy, but that we would have to overcome it. She has to be a mother to them, and as hard as it was for her after carrying the baby for 9 months, I felt it was my obligation to go out and play." Christy understood the decision, partly because she came from a sports family herself and had been married to Gary for his entire professional football career. Part of it was that she knew that Gary didn't want to let his teammates down, and that his teammates were depending on him. And part of it could just be the simple thing of football being a distraction to get your mind off of losing your newborn daughter. Regardless, Danielson was going to play in this game. Everyone knew the situation, including head coach Monty Clark. And even though Danielson watched film on Friday and Saturday and was starting to get back into the football mindset, he had no idea how well he was going to perform. He told Coach Clark beforehand, straight up, that he had no idea where his head was going to be, and that if he didn't play well, that he should put Jeff Kumlow in the game, bench him, and that he would completely understand the decision. And with that, we head to Milwaukee County Stadium for this Week 2 matchup in the NFC Central between the Lions and the Packers. And as we would soon find out, Danielson was about to triumph in absolutely spectacular fashion. On the first play of the game, Danielson drops back to pass. With Mike Butler staring him in the face and coming straight at him, he hits Dexter Bussey over the middle. On the very next play, Danielson hits Bussey again on a simple swing pass. 2 plays and 2 first downs. This was some brilliant coaching on the Lions' part. Get Danielson some easy completions to start the game to get in the right headspace. And on his 3rd throw of the game, which came on 3rd down, Danielson found Freddie Scott for a 38-yard completion to get the Lions in the red zone. While the opening drive was only able to end in a field goal, you could tell that on that first drive, where he went 3 for 3 for over 70 yards, that Danielson was playing inspired. He was going to bring his A game. This hot hand of his continued for the rest of the day. In the first quarter, he went 4 for 4 for 91 yards. At the end of the first half, near midfield and with just 12 seconds left, needing to get some significant yardage to get to field goal range on the beaten up Milwaukee field, Danielson threw this beautiful strike over the middle to Scott. At the start of the 3rd quarter, facing 3rd and 15, Danielson had this amazing run to get the necessary yardage. Who knew that Danielson had wheels like this? Through 3 quarters, the Lions led 22-7, holding a 3-possession lead since there was no 2-point conversion back then. And then came the straw that broke the camel's back. Gary Danielson hits Billy Sims for an 87-yard touchdown strike. Game over. The Lions led 29-7 and won it by that score. On the first 10 drives of the game, 7 of them ended in scores. Only 3 of those 10 drives ended without a point, and on one of those drives, the Lions did nothing but run the ball, so I can't even put that on Danielson. When the game ended, not only did the Lions snap a 5-game losing streak against their rivals, but Danielson finished with arguably the best game of his career. He went 11 for 17 for 246 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, and a passer rating of 127.7. In his time with the Lions, it was the first and only time in his career that he threw for over 200 yards with a touchdown and no picks, while posting a passer rating of 120 or higher. It was a career day for Danielson. After the game, there was a somber attitude in the locker room. It wasn't overly joyous like it was the previous week when the Lions shocked the Rams on opening day. Everyone knew the situation and what was going on. And Billy Sims said it best afterwards, when he said that he played this game for Gary, that the whole team played for him, and that Gary inspired everyone. In the over 90 years that the Detroit Lions have been around, this might just be the most heroic performance of them all. And I'm not quite sure why this game has slipped through the cracks of NFL history. For Gary Danielson to do what he did not even 72 hours after losing his 9-day-old daughter was nothing short of inspiring and remarkable. When you think about the most heroic performances in the history of the Detroit Lions, considering the circumstances, it's hard to top what Gary Danielson did on this day. Be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JRGator9 and subscribe to 60-second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping with the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.